Nerd Reactor, roll out.
What's up, Reactorites? John here, and yes, it's time to talk about Captain Marvel. I watched this last night, and this is definitely a big movie for Marvel Studios because this is the movie leading up to Avengers Endgame, and Avengers Endgame is going to have all the characters. Not all the characters, because half of them are gone, but the few that are remaining, they're going to try to figure out a way to stop Thanos to do something about I don't even know what, is there a term for the Thanos, the snapping? I think that's what it's called. But yeah, but before we get to Avengers Endgame, Captain Marvel, this is a character that was featured or hinted at the very end of Avengers Infinity War, where Nick Fury, he goes out and he uses a pager, and the pager has a logo for Captain Marvel. And so when you're watching this, you're like, so something about Captain Marvel, she's going to be so important. She's going to help turn the tide for the Avengers team to go up against Thanos. And after watching Captain Marvel, yeah, things, it could happen. I'm not sure how they're going to do it because Thanos, he's pretty strong. But Captain Marvel, as you've seen in the trailer, she's super strong. And Captain Marvel, this follows Carol Danvers. She is a soldier, a warrior for this elite squad for the Kree. And it takes place in the 90s. And she gets sent back to Earth. And now she's in this... She's between this war between the Skrulls and the Kree. Since this takes place in the 90s, we get to see a younger version of Nick Fury, a younger version of Agent Coulson, and we get to see just like what was Shield like before Iron Man 1, and here we get to kind of see how Nick Fury is and how he's going to learn to navigate himself, and seeing someone like Captain Marvel with powers. She's from outer space, and kind of sparks Nick Fury's momentum on future movies just because of Captain Marvel. And with this, like the opening, you're gonna love the opening. The very opening, the Marvel Studios logo, it features a tribute to Stan Lee. So like the previous Marvel's logo, you see different Marvel characters. This one is the different Stan Lee cameos from the all the different Marvel films, and I thought it was a very touching tribute for that Marvel logo, Marvel Studios logo. Let's talk about the things I really enjoyed about this movie. Probably my favorite thing about this movie is the Skrulls. The Skrulls here, they're fleshed out. It's like the characters, I actually cared about them, and that's what I love about this. Just taking these Skrulls and then the comics are like, ooh, but here you're like, all right, I understand their point of view. I'm actually like, yeah, all right. These Skrulls, Talos, however you want to pronounce his name, he's definitely my favorite character in Captain Marvel. Talos, he's played by Ben Mendelsohn, and Ben Mendelsohn, he's been in a lot of different movies. He was in Ready Player One. I enjoyed his character in that one. He's kind of like the evil corporate boss, but still he's got some really fun dialogue. And he was also in Star Wars Rogue One. In this one, in Captain Marvel, he's got like one of the funniest, or a few funny lines, and so he was just a really interesting character to watch on screen. And also I love the dynamic between Nick Fury and Carol Danvers, just the way they interact. Nick Fury, he's like a child, like discovering, like a cool new action figure, because he gets to witness the power of Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, her shooting her blast from her fists. And this is like, wow, this is really cool. This is interesting. And just the different dynamics, the trouble that both these characters get into and how they get out of it. And it's just the situation. It's just a fun journey for both of them. And then my other favorite part about this film is the opening, where you kind of get to see the world of Kree But I wish we get to see more of that, or the movie explored more of this, the city, like the capital city for the Kree, because it looks gorgeous. It's beautiful, and it's like a high tech. It's futuristic, and it's like Fifth Element kind of, with like just these cities, or Blade Runner, but not as run down. But it's or maybe it reminds me of like Coruscant from Star Wars. But a little bit more with the neon colors. Another part I really enjoyed about this movie, the setting of the 90s. And because of the 90s, there's a lot of references to that. And I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for this because it's kind of like nostalgia. Especially like in the trailer, you've seen her crashing into a Blockbuster video. And once there, you get to see like all these different movies that are just laid around like on the shelves. So you get it was like an Easter egg of just seeing which movie you recognize, and one of them was Hook, so you can see that, and another one was True Lies. And so like if you're a movie fan from the 90s, you get to see like some really cool stuff, and then you're like, yeah, I recognize that movie, I remember that movie. So it's a really cool Easter egg. And also, since there are a lot of movies now, especially thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy, that help make the whole music in movies very popular. It's been done before in other movies, but Guardians just really was infectious. So here we get to have 90s music like just playing in the background, depending on whatever it is. And you're like, oh, I remember that. Or this song, or this song. So one example would be TLC's Waterfall. That's in there. And there's also music from No Doubt, and there's also music from Nirvana. So that just, for fans of those bands, like you just get goosebumps. And it just reminds me of like Bumblebee. If you've seen Bumblebee, it takes place in the 80s, and there are like a lot of references to the 80s. And that's kind of like the same feeling I had when I'm watching this, like with the references to the 90s. Or like, oh, this is cool, this is cool. Oh, this music, or this reference to this this thing here. And I think you get a kick out of that. But yeah, now moving on to the stuff. My biggest disappointment with this film would have to be Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. And if you've seen the trailers, if you're the people that watched it, you're like, she's not as emotional. Like, she's very robotic or wooden. There's a reason for that. There's this element in the story that explains why she's like that. But then, once everything's explained, and once she's like in tune with like who she is, who Carol Danvers is, like the past, you can see her past when she was a kid, and she's training to become, in the military or the Air Force and all that. So when that comes, I was like, wait a minute, why is she still? Her acting, her delivery just feels off, as if it just doesn't feel right for me. Like, just in terms of the emotional, dramatic aspect, like I couldn't really connect with her performance, just because it didn't move me enough. Like, it just felt flat. That's how I felt. Like, this is like a flat performance for with Brie Larson as Captain Marvel in the this emotional part of this story. And I was hoping that we would get more of that, because there are different types of characters in cinema throughout where they're they're not supposed to show emotions. Kind of like, let's say, Spock. Spock is a character that isn't supposed to show emotions, but you still like him. But it's like in the delivery, like Leonard Nimoy and Zachary Quinto, like when they do the delivery, it's like it's funny and sometimes like a deadpan humor. But you buy into that. Like, these are these characters, and with Brie Larson, like in the beginning, you're like, okay, it makes sense why it's like that. But then the character is still showing some emotions, so you're kind of conflicted. And then later on, near the end of the movie, things are supposed to be changing. The character is supposed to grow, but why is the performance still flat? So that was my gripe, and part of me was thinking like, who would be like a good replacement or like that's what I kept thinking. Like, who could have been a better Captain Marvel? And when I have those thoughts, like that's for me. I don't think that's a good thing. But yeah, that's but that's how I felt. That's how I felt about Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. And then you have the relationship between her, Carol Danvers, and her best friend Maria. For that one, Lashana plays Maria, and for her performance, she does great with what she's given, and you know, you still feel like a connection. Like, hey, man, you know, this is who I train with. This is my partner. This is my friend. But I wish it was fleshed out more for their relationship. Like, I can see the potential, but in this movie, I wasn't invested enough. It just felt empty, just because of, I guess, what she's been through, what Carol Danvers has been through. So I felt that was lacking, and I was hoping that there was just be a more traumatic experience. But it was traumatic. It was traumatic for like the characters. But I really didn't feel it. Like, I couldn't connect to it. But once you watch it, you'll kind of understand like what these characters are going through. But for me, I see what they're going through. I wish there was like a more connection, more emotional moment, more at stake. There is stuff at stake, but I didn't feel it from the performance. Let's compare it to like a movie like Winter Soldier with Steve Rogers, Bucky, and just them. Like, you really feel the friendship, and things are torn. So that movie, The Winter Soldier, that's a really high bar, because that's like my favorite MCU movie. So I don't know if it's like kind of fair to compare it to that, but just to have something like it's serviceable. It's okay. It wasn't like the greatest thing, but I wish there was like just more of that emotional aspect for that. But yeah, so Captain Marvel. Overall, I enjoyed this film. There was a lot of fun moments, a lot of funny moments. Characters like Talos, Nick Fury and Goose. Those are great. And just some fun scenes with young Coulson, and just a lot of like the 90s references. And I do like Brie Larson and her chemistry with Nick Fury, just when they interact, and just crap hits the fan. What are they gonna do? But I do believe that the weakest link belongs to Brie Larson, and also a little bit for Jude Law's performance, or his character. I wish the character had more screen time, but it wasn't enough. It was just it felt like it wasn't. It didn't have enough of an emotional impact for this, and I thought there would be like a great potential, especially with the way they did the scrolls. So I wish that could have been explored more with Jude Law and Brie Larson. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I also love the way they did the scrolls. I love the way, like, if you're wondering if Marvel is in this movie, I'll just say that you'll be happy. Depending on whether you're a purist or not. If you're a purist, then you might be like, but for those that are okay with certain changes, like, okay, this is cool. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Captain Marvel. With that said, I'm John, and I'll see you guys next time.